Welcome to Founder Stories. I'm Mike Abbott. With me today I have Pete Koomen from Optimizely. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mike.
So tell us a little bit about Optimizely.
Sure. So Optimizely makes it really ridiculously easy to run A/B tests on your website. We were about 3.5 years old. We're originally a Y Combinator company, and we were growing incredibly quickly.
Now, one of the things that we were talking about right before the show is just kind of how you came up with Optimizely. And so I think it'd be fun to kind of hear, you and Dan were at Google, you wanted to go start these companies, you kind of reconnected, but this is the third company.
This is
Optimizely. So
tell
us
actually,
about that
yeah,
journey, because I know from myself, it's about iterating and knowing when to actually give up, and that's a tough question to answer for an entrepreneur. So I'd love to hear how you did that.
It is a really hard one. Yeah. So Dan and I met in 2006. We were both associate product managers at Google, and we quickly bonded over a shared interest in entrepreneurship and spent weekends together brainstorming and hacking. And we're actually ready to kind of go out on our own in late 2007. And that's when Dan and we both saw Barack Obama speak on the Google campus. And I remember walking out being kind of mildly interested, but Dan had sort of an epiphany moment and quit his job a few weeks later, moved to Chicago, slept on someone's floor, and became the director of analytics on the Obama campaign. And so I kept working on Google. I was working on the App Engine team, and he went through the campaign and then spent a little time in DC and then decided to come back to San Francisco, and that's when I left Google. So we started our first company in 2009, and that was an educational software company for young kids, and it's called Carrot Sticks. It's still out there. It's actually somewhat popular now. It just makes no money. And it was an amazing experience, also a very difficult experience. And we realized that it was going to be very difficult to build a large sustainable company for us in that area, and so we decided to pivot about 8 months later or so. And we started our second company, which I won't even go into. We got into Y Combinator and realized pretty soon thereafter that was also a pretty bad idea. And so we started Optimizely. And Optimizely, the original inspiration really came from Dan's experience on the Obama campaign. So he ran with a team a lot of A/B tests that had a profound effect on the campaign. They raised tens of millions of dollars. And left sort of thinking, wow, that was really incredibly powerful, but also really incredibly difficult to do. And I think that idea sort of was dormant for quite a while, but when we were sitting there after 2 failures, desperate for something to work on, kind of came back to this. There's a very, very powerful concept that's very difficult to do. And we ended up really finding a spot where there was a real big hole in the market, I think.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a bit more, though. I mean, how twice, at the beginning of your entrepreneurship journey, you one day said, okay, we need to stop this idea and do something else. Like, tell me about that decision.
It looks a little black and white when I look back on it, but honestly at the time it wasn't. There was a lot of doubt, a lot of uncertainty, and quite frankly a lot of low points. And it's with an idea like with Carrot Sticks where you're trying to help young kids learn math, it's something that most ideas, in fact, don't take hold right away. They take a long time to grow slowly, and so it's really hard to know, is this really not going anywhere, or have we just not hit our inflection point yet? And for us, it was a combination of really, really not seeing the growth we wanted to see, but also realizing that we weren't parents, we weren't kids, we weren't teachers, we weren't administrators. We were wholly disconnected from an ecosystem that we were trying to build tools for. And we just decided that there may be amazing things we can do here, or someone can do here, but those people aren't us, and our strengths are elsewhere. And so it was a long process, a hard one. For the second company, it was a little easier.
Can I pause you right there? Yeah, of course. So you kind of have this slow, we'll say, decision that you make to like, okay, we're not going to pursue this anymore. I just out of curiosity, like that next day, before you get into the second company, like, was it, okay, a whiteboard, Dan, like, let's go brainstorm, or like, how did you guys switch your mindsets?
That's a good question. I think, again, it was a little more gradual, and so we started saying, well, this is going okay, but why don't we spend a little time every day starting to brainstorm other ideas? And over the course of, I think, a couple weeks, it just became clear that our minds were now elsewhere, and we had found something we were excited about at the time, and just decided, you know what, let's go all in on this one. And meanwhile, the things we had built for Carrot Sticks were out there, and they were live, and and we didn't kill it. We just decided, let's put this on the burner for a little while, and focus on something else.
And one of the other interesting things you shared with me is that the timeline between the ideation and getting financing for these 3 companies.
Yeah, actually, and that was another thing that contributed some of the stress that first year, was that Dan had left. Dan, I think, went a little bit longer than I did, but we both went more than a year without a paycheck. And kind of went into it expecting we were going to need to be able to last a while, but somehow when you're in it, it always feels a lot longer, and you watch the bank balance dwindle. It's extremely stressful. And so we didn't actually end up getting financing. We took a little bit from Y Combinator in fall of 2009. And then midway through Y Combinator, actually ditched our second idea and started working on Optimizely. And we're able to raise a round in, I think, April of that year, a seed round. And that was a huge milestone for us.
Kind of a short time. And then you were able to actually not have to raise money for quite some time.
Yes, actually.
And I think that's another interesting, which is pretty unique, of actually building a business that's generating money from the earliest days.
Yeah, I think maybe it was because we went through 2 failures first, but we really developed a mindset where we focused on getting revenue very early on. We wanted to build a sustainable business. And so actually, if you look at our timeline, it's pretty interesting. For our first idea, the time from inception to first dollar was about 8 months. And for the second idea, it was about a month and a half. And for Optimizely, it was about a day. So we actually were able to sell Optimizely before we really even had a product. And I think that's a shift in our mindset. And so we started really hungry to build a business, and we were able to, once we launched formally in October of 2010, I think, it took us about a year on that angel capital before we actually hit profitability and were able to start growing the business on revenue.
Yeah, which is congratulations. And that's
Thank you.
Not easy to do.
It was a big accomplishment.
And then you decided to take a larger, quite a good size round.
That's right. We took a small kind of buffer round in 2012, just as a safety net, and then earlier this year we were fortunate enough to raise a much larger round led by Benchmark.
Congratulations.
Yes.
One interesting that comes to mind is when you've been running that tight and lean, and it's something I can empathize with, and all of a sudden you have a reasonable size cash infusion. How do you decide how to most efficiently deploy that capital to accelerate the business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Fortunately for us, I think, because we'd been focused on building a sustainable business, we had been pretty diligent about tracking our numbers, building models, and trying to really understand what our growth drivers were. And so by the time we actually had the capital in the bank, we had a relatively good idea of where we needed to deploy it in terms of hiring and marketing. So it wasn't sort of like this giant bucket of cash, let's go explore. We really actually knew where the fuel needed to be poured.
Yeah, that's great. And so you've got about 115 people at the company today?
Yes, I think we're about 115.
And you and Dan, the way you guys split it is you run engineering, design, product, and HR, and he runs sales, marketing, and finance, right? You kind of divide it that way?
Yeah, Dan's the CEO. But yes, we split responsibilities like that. I focus much more on the product side of the house. Dan focuses a lot more on the business side, so sales, marketing, support, finance.
And so as the sales team go out and bring in these deals as generating this money for you guys, how do you balance the demands from your customers on what they want in the product versus your vision for where it needs to go, and how do you kind of balance that which I think is always a challenge for these types of businesses?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's not easy, and it's always eventually some kind of compromise between the two, right? I mean, you have to have a vision in order to lead a team and inspire people and actually build something worthwhile. But at the same time, if your vision is completely disconnected from the people that you're serving and selling to, you're going to fail. And I think we learned that through those failures. I mean, that year that we spent trying different ideas was really an exercise in learning how to understand customers and do customer development. We're big fans of Steve Blank's 4 Steps to the Epiphany. It's a great book, and have really taken that to heart. So I would say that today we tried to build an engineering and product culture where the engineers understand the issues that our customers have. They understand the reasons that we're building these things and are hopefully empowered to make product decisions themselves. We try to encourage a lot of contact between customers and the teams that handle them and the teams that build the products.
And how do you do that? Is it customers dealing with some support issues directly, or how do you?
So we have a shadowing program where engineers will go and sit with support team members and sales team members. And we also actually have weekly rotations where certain engineers will act as a liaison between support and sales and the rest of the engineering team. So every engineer goes through that. Every engineer gets to sit in, or at least next to, the desk of someone who's interacting daily with customers all the time.
That's fantastic, because then it really builds that empathy and understanding of what other teams do. Because sometimes, although you'll end up in a situation where an engineering team looks at sales and it's like this mystery group that tends to have a lot of dinners. Where at the same time, sales is a really important function, obviously, and so there kind of needs to be this, understanding. It doesn't mean necessarily understand all the details technology-wise, but I think it's a great model you've developed to kind of build that bridge.
Yeah, for us it was actually maybe a little bit reactionary because of the culture that we experienced at Google, where I felt like there was a large divide between the sales and operations side of the company and the engineering product side of the company. At least this was my perception as a low-level employee there. And when we started Optimizely, we started with everybody in the same room, and it was very easy at that point to understand, what sort of problems are we causing, what kind of bugs have we developed. But as we got a lot bigger, we realized we had to be proactive about it, or else we developed the same thing. And so we started sitting down and thinking, okay, how do we actually bridge this gap now that not everybody's in the same room?
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Pete, for coming on the Founder Stories, and thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.